You are standing in the grocery store, staring at price tags that make no sense. Chicken costs more, rent went up, car insurance jumped. Somewhere in the back of your mind, a very logical question starts to form. If the government can just print money, why not print enough of it to fix these high costs? My name is Alex. I asked this exact question in my early 20s, genuinely confused about why it wouldn't work. When I finally understood the real answer, it changed how I save, spend, and protect my money. The answer to that question changes how you should think about every dollar you currently own. Creating money by itself doesn't automatically create real wealth. When you stack up new currency on one side of the scale without adding goods to the other, the scale tilts. The result? Prices go up. That is inflation at core. As those prices climb, the money sitting in your pocket weakens. Every existing dollar in circulation can suddenly buy a little bit less than it could the day before. Inflation is not an abstract economic event. It is an active drain on the assets you have already earned. Before looking at the government's role, look at your own accounts. Evaluate exactly how much of your total savings is sitting in plain, uninvested cash. Isolate roughly 3 to 6 months of living expenses in easily accessible cash as an emergency buffer. For savings beyond that, it makes sense to move them into places with a better chance to grow over the long term. Being intentional about how much you keep in cash versus how much you put to work is the simplest way to deal with inflation. Most people never make that distinction, and over the years, the lack of a plan costs them. When a wave of new money floods the economy while the supply of real goods remains stagnant, the math of your life shifts. Your existing dollars immediately lose a fraction of their purchasing power. Purchasing power is simply the amount of goods or services one unit of money can buy. You do not get a notification when this happens, and no one warns you. You just start noticing that your paycheck is no longer stretching as far as it used to. It feels like getting a pay cut without anyone actually changing your pay. If you ignore these macroeconomic shifts, you are effectively allowing an invisible force to reduce your true salary. This loss of purchasing power can happen gradually in the background over long periods, rather than just during extreme economic events. This chart shows the long-term reality. As money supplies grow over time, the same amount of cash buys a little less than it used to. Prices may not jump all at once, but year after year, that small percentage of lost value adds up. Time is the primary multiplier of inflation, turning small annual losses into a significant erosion of wealth for anyone holding static cash. Governments and central banks often have reasons for increasing the money supply. Central banks are the national institutions responsible for managing a country's currency and monetary policy. They may do this to stabilize a downturn or reduce the damage from a crisis. But those macro decisions always have micro realities. The side effect, the quiet loss of purchasing power, hits people who keep their money in cash especially hard. People who understand how this works take steps to protect themselves. Those who do not are left wondering why everything feels more expensive, even though their income has stayed the same. Now, I will break down exactly what happens when a government creates new money and the mechanics of why it doesn't fix these problems. Once you see how money creation actually functions, you can better protect your savings from its quiet loss of value. When an economy struggles, printing more money sounds like the most obvious, painless fix imaginable. Just create more cash and give it to the people who need it. But that approach almost never works the way we expect it to. Take a look at this model. It represents a perfectly balanced microeconomy. There are 10 people, each person has $10, and the local baker has exactly 10 loaves of bread for sale. At $10 a loaf, supply meets demand perfectly, and everyone gets to eat. Now, let's say the town council decides to help everyone out by giving each person an extra $10. Suddenly, everybody has $20 in their pocket. But the baker didn't bake any more bread. There are still exactly 10 loaves sitting on the shelf. With double the cash floating around, people start outbidding each other to make sure they get their daily loaf. The baker sees a line out the door and a flood of new cash, so he raises his prices to match the new demand. Very quickly, a single loaf of bread costs $20. The town doubled its money supply, but it didn't produce a single new calorie of food. It simply required twice as many dollars to buy the exact same item. Whenever an economy rapidly increases the amount of money circulating without a matching increase in real, tangible goods, broad price increases are a mathematical certainty. The currency itself becomes weaker. To see how this plays out in the real world, imagine you put $10,000 into a savings account and leave it there for a few years while the cost of living climbs. When you log into your bank app, the screen still clearly says you have $10,000. But when you take that money to the grocery store or buy a car, it covers a fraction of what it used to. Inflation acts like a leak in your finances. It drains your purchasing power quietly in the background without ever taking a single penny out of your actual account balance. If you just hold on to static cash during an inflationary period, you are guaranteed to lose actual wealth, even if the numbers on your screen tell you you're perfectly safe. Most people picture this process as a massive industrial printing press, stamping out billions of paper bills on large sheets. But that's not how modern money is created. This diagram shows how it actually happens. Central banks inject newly created capital, called digital liquidity, straight into the financial system. Liquidity simply refers to the amount of available cash that can be easily lent and spent. They distribute these digital units through commercial banks and financial markets to encourage new lending. Governments can also launch aggressive spending programs. This pumps money directly into the economy to increase consumer demand, just running through a different set of pipes. But regardless of the distribution method, this diagram highlights the main bottleneck. Pumping up digital demand does not automatically build new housing, harvest more food, pump more energy, or train more doctors. Modern money creation is just the digital manipulation of demand, and no amount of digital code can overwrite the physical limits of real-world supply. In the very short term, this injection of cash feels like an economic boom. People spend more freely, businesses report record revenues, and the entire system looks incredibly healthy. But eventually, the physical supply of goods fails to keep up with the surge in spending. That's the breaking point where broad, systemic price increases lock in across the entire economy. Look at what happens to this gauge. To stop prices from spiraling permanently, policymakers are forced to raise interest rates, which is the cost of borrowing money. As these rates tick up, borrowing becomes significantly harder, purposefully choking off economic growth to cool down the spending. This timeline illustrates a critical hidden flaw. The new money doesn't reach everyone simultaneously. Institutions buy assets at baseline prices before inflation hits. By the time newly printed money reaches everyday workers, the cost of living has surged, while their wages lag years behind. The delay between the creation of money and the rise in prices creates a massive systemic disadvantage for anyone who earns a standard wage. As an individual, you have absolutely zero control over what central banks decide to do with interest rates, or how much money a government decides to print. The only variable under your direct control is where your own money is sitting before the inflationary cycle takes root. When headlines about money printing start to circulate, the worst thing you can do is panic. Selling off assets erratically or abandoning a financial plan on impulse usually costs people far more than the inflation itself. Surviving this economic cycle requires recognizing that static cash is an illusion of safety. Protecting your wealth means deliberately positioning your assets to weather the hidden drain of inflation, long before the first price tag changes. You might understand exactly how money creation works and why it pushes prices higher, but knowing the mechanics of inflation does not automatically mean you will respond to it wisely. In fact, exposure to constant headlines about money printing and rising costs triggers emotional reactions, and for many people, those reactions actively make their financial situation worse. These destructive financial choices aren't random. They usually fall into highly predictable, recognizable patterns of behavior. Let me walk you through the 4 biggest behavioral traps investors fall into when inflation makes the news, and why the obvious reactions are usually the wrong ones. Once you can identify these specific mistakes, you can replace reactive, fear-based decisions with a calm, pre-planned strategy. Mistake number 1 is rushing to buy assets. When the government expands the money supply and inflation climbs, the immediate public instinct is to aggressively flee from cash. The logic feels simple. Cash is losing value, so people indiscriminately throw their money at whatever happens to be trending that week: gold, real estate, or cryptocurrency. This graph shows the mechanical flaw. By the time you react, fear has already pushed prices upward. You buy at the absolute peak, paying a massive premium driven by headlines. Buying assets out of panic replaces investing with a reflexive emotional response. That brings us to mistake number 2. the opposite extreme, ignoring inflation entirely and changing absolutely nothing about your financial routine. The psychological trap here is passivity. People hear about macroeconomic money printing, assume there is nothing they can personally do about it, and decide to just maintain the status quo. But doing nothing is still an active choice. If your daily living costs are climbing, but your saving and investing habits stay exactly the same, your budget quietly gets tighter month by month. This bar chart compares a static, low-interest bank yield against a rapidly rising inflation rate. Cash in standard accounts gets caught in the middle. That expanding negative gap proves that leaving your money alone steadily bleeds purchasing power. Passivity accepts compounding losses. Whether you are panic buying trend assets or totally ignoring the rising cost of living, both errors result in the same outcome. You surrender control of your financial baseline to external economic forces. Mistake number 3 sounds clever on the surface. It is the idea that taking on heavy debt today is smart because future inflated dollars will be worth less and easier to pay back. In very limited situations, that logic partly applies. A fixed-rate loan can feel easier to carry, but only if your personal income actually rises over time while the monthly payment stays the same. The dangerous reality is that consumers take this logic too far. They over-leverage themselves with credit card debt and massive car loans, assuming inflation will somehow bail them out. This diagram tracks a race showing why that assumption fails. The steep curve is high-interest consumer debt. The flat line represents average income growth. Consumer interest rates drastically outpace inflation. If income fails to outpace debt, you get crushed by heavier payments. Finally, we have mistake number 4, the obsessive fixation on economic forecasts and trying to perfectly time every financial move. This timing fallacy causes investors to indefinitely delay major purchases, hoping prices drop, or constantly shift their funds between accounts based on what they think next quarter's inflation data will say. The core flaw here is that inflation is a notoriously erratic metric. Even professional analysts with full research teams and decades of historical data fail to forecast it consistently. Building your personal strategy around guessing future prices is a guaranteed way to introduce instability and miss clear long-term opportunities. Relying on supposed debt loopholes or the illusion of perfect foresight shifts your strategy away from reliable planning and straight into high-stakes gambling. A calmer approach requires stepping away from all of these reactive habits. You have to abandon the need to predict the future and instead build a resilient system. This system must function effectively whether inflation runs aggressively hot, eventually cools down, or stagnates somewhere in between. That is exactly what we are going to build right now. A concrete, step-by-step action plan you can start today to insulate your money from erratic shifts in the money supply. Following a proactive plan for unpredictable prices and interest rates offers a path forward that doesn't depend on chasing the daily news cycle. This diagram shows a printing press continuously producing currency, driving up the price tags on basic commodities. You likely already understand how this works. When governments print money, everyday prices go up instead of fixing the underlying economic issues. You also know that reacting with panic or making drastic financial bets to fix this drain on your wallet usually makes the situation worse. So here is exactly what to do about it. I am going to walk you through a precise, chronological, 6-step system to combat inflation. None of these steps require specialized financial knowledge, and most of them are completely free. Defeating inflation is not about controlling the global economy. It is about executing a few simple, proactive steps to organize and shield your personal wealth. Let's start with what you can do today. Step 1. Take a money snapshot. Sit down for about 15 minutes and write out the exact location and balance of every dollar you own. Map out how much is in your checking, your savings, your retirement, and any invested accounts. Get the full picture on one single page. This graph shows what happens to money yielding zero return. If you leave your funds sitting in places that earn almost nothing, your purchasing power drops as inflation rises. You cannot fix financial blind spots you cannot see, so you must map everything out first. Step 2. Set up an automatic transfer to an account where your money can actually grow. Pick a small amount you can afford each payday and route it directly into an investment or retirement account. It does not need to be a massive amount. The critical part is that it happens automatically. Automating this process guarantees execution because it completely removes human memory and willpower from the equation. This chart shows how your money grows exponentially thanks to compound interest. Compounding is a financial mechanism where your initial money generates returns, and then those returns start generating their own returns over time. Even a modest amount invested consistently will expand rapidly. By seeing exactly where your current funds sit and automating your future contributions, you build a financial foundation that operates and grows without requiring your daily effort. Step 3. Check whether your workplace retirement plan offers a match. If your employer offers to match part of your contribution and you are not putting in enough to capture the full amount, you need to investigate your plan. An employer match is immediate, guaranteed growth. The company adds its own money to your balance when you contribute, which accelerates your savings goals before market returns even factor in. Just slide your contributions to optimize for the specific rules and limits in your plan. Step 4. Explore inflation-aware investment options. Once you have money flowing into your accounts, you must recognize that not all assets defend against rising prices the same way. Certain specific government bonds are structurally designed to adjust and absorb the impact of inflation. They physically increase their payout to help protect your purchasing power when the cost of living goes up. Alternatively, broad stock market index funds have historically outpaced inflation over long-term horizons. An index fund is an investment that tracks a large basket of stocks, representing a whole market rather than a single company. They carry short-term volatility, but placing long-term money here gives it a strong chance of outrunning rising prices. Capturing the available capital from your employer and actively choosing assets that outrun rising prices creates an active, structural defense against the devaluation of your currency. Step 5. Do a line-by-line budget review for cost creep. Pull up your bank and credit card statements from the past 2 months and look closely at every single recurring charge. You are looking for 2 specific targets. First, find and cancel any forgotten subscriptions you no longer use. Second, identify the bills that have quietly increased, like utilities, insurance, or streaming services, and negotiate a better rate or switch to a cheaper option. This audit is strictly about eliminating hidden vendor increases that slowly pile up. It is not about restricting your lifestyle or cutting out the purchases you actually enjoy. Step 6. Build a simple check-in habit. Set aside 30 minutes once or twice a year to review exactly where your money is currently allocated across your various accounts. Over time, uneven growth will cause your asset mix to drift away from your original goals. When that happens, you need to engage in portfolio rebalancing. Rebalancing is the process of selling portions of your overperforming assets and buying underperforming ones to correct your target mix. Routine pruning of budget waste and simple biannual rebalancing keeps your financial engine running lean and strictly aligned with your goals. You cannot stop governments from creating money. You cannot individually control inflation. Those are macro realities that will continue to happen. The people who experience a silent erosion of their wealth are the ones who take no action, rely on hope, and let rising prices eat away at their purchasing power. But you do not have to fall victim to that tide. The people who secure a fortified position are the ones who proactively execute these simple, boring moves ahead of time. If this made the money printing story finally click, hit like so more people can find this video. Share this with anyone who keeps wondering why everything is getting more expensive. And down in the comments, drop the words cash or assets. I post new videos every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. Subscribe to the channel, take action to protect your wealth, and I will see you in the next one.